Asia Tech Podcast with Graham Brown and Michael Waits.
Hi, this is Michael Waits from Asia Tech Podcast Stories. I am with Guy Hearn, the Chief Investment Officer of Omnicom Media. Omnicom, big company, yeah? I mean, one of the leading companies, advertising, marketing, corporate communications. It's like the whole suite of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we obviously our base is in what used to be called creative agencies, advertising agencies. But I work across the media division, and we have lots of smaller businesses doing all sorts of specialist services. But one small correction: I'm the Chief Innovation Officer, not the Chief Investment Officer. Lots of CIOs.
See, that's what I have on my brain, right? And that's my problem, is that I come out of that career of spending way too many years at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, and when I see CIO, my brain just processes it without me thinking. So, Chief Innovation Officer. I stand corrected.
We all have to be CIOs these days. Everybody's a CIO.
You could be the chief information, but you're not that either. You're the chief innovation.
Exactly.
So what does that mean, actually? So on the media services side of the business, what are you doing, actually?
So if it's our job to make sure that our clients messages and content get in front of the right people at the right time and the right place, and hopefully in the right mindset, so that we can make an impact and help the brands we work for tell their stories and get engagement from the consumers that they want. It's a difficult challenge these days, because obviously it's a very cluttered marketing environment, and there's many new platforms which you can potentially communicate with people. So it's all quite dynamic, very fast changing. The last 2 or 3 years, what we're doing has changed a lot, and it's a really exciting area to be in. New opportunities present themselves every day.
Can you just walk me through this a little bit? I do a lot of work, obviously. I'm in the media business as well, right? But I do a lot of work on the flip side, right? Whether it's advertising or public relations. And you're right, just trying to figure out, is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? Is it Snapchat? Is it Instagram? And that's just the new stuff. That doesn't bring in television and radio, which still exists, right? And other I'm going to keep. There's so much stuff. How do you figure it out, and what do you focus on?
Yeah, so I think a lot depends on the type of challenges that the clients are trying to solve. I mean, you're right. I mean, TV still exists, and a lot of people still watch it. It's just a question that we don't have people's undivided attention as we used to have, and people are on multiple devices at the same time. So it's a question of what's the really about what the right time and right place is, right? So if I want to talk to you about your breakfast options at a fast or QS, what we call QSR, a fast food outlet, right? What's the best time and place and medium to do that in? Are you going to respond to that if you see an ad for it on TV while you're watching TV the night before? Yeah, maybe you might make a date for breakfast with somebody. It's possible. Or is it more likely that while on your mobile device on the bus or the train or driving to work, that particular bit of information or that particular message might hit you when you are actually feeling hungry and feeling like some breakfast stuck in a traffic jam. So it's really about the time and place and context and the speed of the purchase cycle, right? So people can make a decision to buy fast food twice a day if they want to do so. They'll make a decision to buy a household consumable, washing powder or something, maybe once a month or every 2 months. But you make a decision to buy a car every 3, 4, 5 years. So right. How do we keep our brand? How do we keep the brand in your consideration set when you enter that research phase? When you go from I really should change my car to now I'm definitely going to go and buy a new car. How do we make sure that we're relevant and present, so when you start making that decision, we're in your consideration set?
Yeah, and also, how do you reconcile this whole concept of television itself is measurable, but not nearly as measurable as click-throughs, and we can argue a lot about whether that click-through really matters or not, because is it robotic? Is it part of a real-time bidding? All this kind of stuff matters. But how do you reconcile the data that you do have versus the data that you think you have, really. And I'm really curious, right? And again, I'm just really trying to figure out from my business perspective, how do I measure that?
Yeah. So you're right. So measurement challenges are one of the things that take up a lot of my time, and how do we get better at doing that, right? So, for instance, in what we still call a digital environment or digital platforms, you're right. There are metrics like click-through rates and things, which you tell us something, but they're not particularly good measure success. We're working on things such as a cost of per valued impression. And we're working on all that sorts of elements around viewability, and trying to create currencies around viewability, so to try to make sure that we are paying on behalf of brands, publishers for for content or impressions that people actually see. It's not buried below the fold on the page; you can't see it. It's not optimized for mobile, so you don't see it. It may play, but nobody paid any attention to it. All of those things. So the challenges of measurement are huge, and there's a lot of work going on in an area that's called multi-touch digital attribution, where you apply certain weights to actions that consumers take on the way to the goal that you want them to take, and finding the best and most efficient pathways for them to do it. So it's, when I say things have changed the last couple of years, 5 years ago I used to employ people with, for example, research backgrounds, but now I employ people with computer science and mathematical backgrounds. Right. Yeah. And the whole area of what people call data science, not necessarily always accurately, but what they call data science is becoming more and more important to us. So I have a team of mathematicians who are working on advanced models to do exactly that, to try and get our measurement frameworks better, and so that we can improve our efficiency and our impact.
Right, so this is actually really interesting to me, and actually this gets back to the mistake that I made at the beginning of this conversation when I said Chief Investment Officer. And let me give you a little bit of context, and I'd love to know what you think about this. This is a common theme for me, right? But again, it may be my embedded bias, but I'm just curious. So, back in the old days when I was sitting on an equity trading desk, all of those equity exchanges became electrified, right? So electronic. In other words, we used to call somebody on the floor, and then we just had an electronic connection to the floor, and it changed the way we traded, right? So in the old days, I think it mirrors actually what you're talking about. We had a lot of people sitting on the trading desk that did research. This stock is going up, that stock is going down, and then we made trading decisions based on that. And we had a lot more time too, because if it was necessary to make a phone call or even to insert a disk into a disk drive to make a decision, we had plenty of time to make that decision. But as technology improved, what we saw was that the math around trading, the trends around trading, and the electronic trading systems made it much more efficient to start employing fewer research people and more mathematicians and computer science people, because they could then determine how past behavior impacted future behavior, and then how to build algorithms. I'm sure this is all sounding really familiar to you, around that activity. And so when I look at the advertising business, and we're just talking about one part of your business, but when I look at the ad business, whether it's an RTB system or a DSP system, to me it just seems like a trading system.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is about trading efficiency. You're right. I mean, not necessarily all the listeners will know this, but right. Obviously, if you land on the front page of your favorite newspaper, and if I land on that same front page, we're not going to be necessarily served the same messages, right? Because right. You and my profile may look completely different to each other, and those decisions, those bidding decisions, are made in real time based on the time, microseconds between you calling up the URL and landing on that page. Yeah, absolutely. So it is very similar to, and in fact we call the bits of the business that do that type of work, we call them trading desks. Yeah, because it's exactly what goes on. We build better and better predictive algorithms based on the data and information that we have in place, and hopefully we get more and more efficient at it. There is a slight downside to this though, which we have to watch out for. And one of those things is that we can only base the algorithms and the decisions based on the behavior that we can see that person, or rather not that person, but that device has engaged with before. When there's no information, right, we have nothing. We have nothing to predict on. And I always give the example of this, like which applies to me. I've always dreamed of going an ambition to go to Antarctica for a vacation, right?
Right.
And I have never done anything online, as far as I'm aware, that would give anybody any indication that was my plan. I haven't researched any trips. I don't look at Antarctic websites. There's nothing really other than broad profiling that would tell anybody that. As such, I have never been served any content about a trip to Antarctica. Whereas, if you got me at the right time of year, when I was feeling like a vacation and I had some money, then it might be a successful thing to do. So we do have to watch out for over-targeting people, just to be on the assumption that things that you have done before are the only predictor of things you want to do.
Right. I mean, if you lend your phone to your daughter, and she looks up, I'm going to date myself, but like Miley Cyrus, or who knows who it is, right? But some pop star who's probably not current right now. Sorry about that. But then you're going to keep getting served stuff like that. I see it. I test retargeting all the time on myself, right? So I'll input something into a browser just to see what happens. And it amazes me how quickly that browser reacts. But and again, I love this whole concept of having a trading desk and an advertising agency and also running back-end algorithms, right? That RTB, again, real people don't know this, but it's real-time bidding. And I wonder, one of the things that we saw, and I hadn't even thought about talking to you about this, but now that we're here, if you don't mind, right? One of the things that we saw was what we called system spoofing, right? In other words, if I can place a bid, I can also place an offer. And that means that I can literally have multiple bids at different price levels for different securities. And I mean, ad space is really just a security in this example. And that means that when other people start bidding above me, I can actually pull my bid and make sure that they're overpaying for a security. Do you think you see any of that kind of spoofing in that market as well?
Look, it's a really, really good point. I haven't personally seen much evidence of that. I mean, in Asia, we are probably properly 2 years into what we call a programmatic environment or algorithmic bidding environment, and I haven't personally seen that. But given that all the people working on this are very much taking their cues from markets such as financial equities market, I wouldn't be surprised if it's another thing that we have to battle with. We all already have to battle with it, as you mentioned previously. We already have to battle with fraudulent traffic and with bots and various other elements. That means that not all of the buys are against genuine inventory. We have to worry about brand safety issues and making sure that we're not putting our brands in environments where they wouldn't want to be. And I think that's another issue that we're going to have to look out for.
Yeah. So again, this gets really interesting, right? And it gets very meta. So in the financial industry, we had to worry about high frequency trading, right? A lot of co-location. So put your server closer to the exchange. And in our cases, the exchange were well-defined locations, right? So if I put a server in wherever the New York Stock Exchange or the Tokyo Stock Exchange was, and if my wire was shorter than your wire, I mean, for simplicity's sake, I could trade faster than you. And I made a lot of money, but I could make a lot of money doing that. I think it's kind of different in this market, but what ended up happening was, it became really hard to regulate whether that HFT trading was actually good or bad for the market. But in the ad space, is there a regulator like that can then define what those rules should be, or is it more just like no, right?
No, there isn't. I mean, the regulations vary from country to country, but essentially it's self-regulated according to different standards, which different industry bodies in different countries want to put in place. But no, it is not regulated to that extent. No.
Right, and that's interesting because what I see is, again, back in the financial markets, it just became a really big problem, and it put regulators in a bad situation. There was a lot of sort of sturm and drang around that. But you actually have an opportunity then, right? Because if you can show your clients that not we're outside that market, but we're above that market, We actually know how to use all this data better than everybody else, and that's where your data scientists and your mathematicians and computer science teams come in. If we can actually mine that data better than everybody else, we can actually provide you better service. So for you, I think all that noise is an opportunity, I think.
It is an opportunity to show that we can do things better, and better doesn't necessarily always mean faster. It just mean better in terms of, as I say, for many of our clients, brand safety is a huge issue. You know, you don't necessarily want to be buying cheap inventory, which may have high viewership if it puts you in an environment with either content or content that you don't like, or beliefs that you don't believe your customers would respect. So there's a lot of issues around that, and I think where we're getting to in the next couple of years, and I think this is where things are going to turn really interesting, is I think as our personal devices get smarter and turn more into personal assistants than simply, you know, smartphones,
right,
and you start to be able to outsource decisions to your device, then we're going to get into an area where we're actually marketing to machines rather than to people, at least to some extent. So you're not going to make a decision about where to go on holiday or something else that you care about. You're not going to outsource that decision, but your decision as to for things that are commodified for you that you don't really care about, as to, you know, what washing powder you use, or, you know, whatever else is just a commodified decision. You're going to empower your an algorithm in your personal device to make those decisions for you, you know, based on price, or based on environmental factors, or based on whatever else is important to you as a consumer. And then we will have to market to that algorithm, as opposed to marketing to a human being's eyeballs, at least for something. And I think that's where when all of this is going to get really interesting, when it's basically algorithms speaking to other algorithms.
Right. So that's really interesting, right? So, and we saw this. You know, a trader's not making a decision, the machine's making it, but then the exchange is making those decisions about how to place those bids and offers. It's really interesting. But then what does it mean for a brand, right? Like, pick a big brand. The whole idea around an ad, and again, I'm simplifying it. I'm not an expert. I'm just saying what I think, right? But the whole idea is, you know, I want to buy a pair of sneakers, and I can make a choice between Adidas and Puma and Nike, let's say. And I'm sorry if I've chosen the wrong brands for that, but you know what I mean, right?
I don't work for any of those, so that's fine.
Good. Wow. Lucky for me. No lawsuits, no problems. But if I pick one of those, the idea is, like you said, if I'm getting closer and closer to the sort of time and place that I'm going to make that decision, and I see and I'm indifferent, and I see an ad for Nike, I'm going to go buy a pair of Nike sneakers. That's the idea, that it's slightly, you know, I get to make a decision. But if it's an algorithm that has predetermined what I prefer, and then you sort of market to that preference, where do I lose, like, where do I gain my own ability to be, like, more deterministic about what I do and what I buy?
So I think it's all going to be about the extent to which you genuinely care about the item at hand. And look, you know, so buying a pair of running shoes is, obviously it's to some extent a personal preference. Whereas I say you may personally not care at all what shampoo you have in the bathroom, or what soap you have in the bathroom. You know, they may all be much of a muchness. The thing that those three sneaker companies will have to do is not only just provide you with the right offer as you get to that moment of truth when you're making a decision. You know, with locational targeting now, we know. I know this sounds a bit scary sometimes, but we know when your device goes into the mall, right? And we know when your device is near a shoe shop or a sporting goods shop. We know that, and we know that because most people will leave open apps like, and just as an example, Facebook, right? And you leave that open. You don't close it and open it up, so it's constantly pinging for a signal every 30 seconds or 90 seconds, right? So we know a lot about your location. So if you're going into a mall, and we know there's a sports store in the mall, and we know from some of your browsing behavior, or rather, I should always make this plain, right? It's your device's behavior, not you. We don't know that it's a
right. You don't know it's Michael.
Being.
Yeah.
I don't know it's Michael. I know it's I device ID 1234, right?
Right. You know MAC address, basically.
Yeah, and so that device ID we also know has been looking has been looking at, an e-commerce site around sports shoes, or we know that been reading an article about the marathon coming up in 2 weeks, right? So we know various contextual information that can lead us to make a decision and say, yeah, good chance that this device is in the market to buy some running shoes. Then you can put forward some sort of all the various brands can bid for the opportunity to show you something about their brand, be that an offer or be it a piece of brand content. And I think one of the other things around this is that, advertising itself is going to change, so that the messages you see from brands in the future, in the very near future, are going to be less like your traditional 30-second TV spot, and they're going to be much more about providing a utility and providing something useful for you to consumer. So, in the case of running shoes, it might be, hey, Michael, we can, if you just go in here, we can take a mold of your foot, and then every time you want to order a pair of running shoes in the future from any of our stores anywhere in the world, you can just hit this thing on your app, and they're going to come and arrive at your house, right? So in terms of making things easier for you, or giving you that experience, and say, hey, do you want, do you like white running shoes, black running shoes? Well, we haven't got any black ones, but we'll 3D print some and send them over to your place in however long it takes to print that, right? So I think a lot of it is going to be about providing useful convenience and utility to consumers rather than necessarily always showing a 30-second, emotion building, brand building film of some description.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like, and again, I'm not a normal consumer, right? I don't watch television, and frankly, I don't listen to a lot of radio. And to be fair, I haven't even lived in my home country, whatever that means anymore, in almost 30 years, right? So, and that makes me kind of a unique consumer. But I'm just really, I've been thinking for a long time about how NFC chips and, Bluetooth beacons and all this stuff will create this sort of really hyper-local advertising model.
Yep.
And I hear conversations about it a lot, but I don't see it in my own day-to-day life yet, even though I know the technology, both from a hardware perspective, from a software perspective, and from a desirability perspective, is there. I just don't see it yet. Is it coming soon? Or is it already there and I just don't notice?
It is coming. I mean, I think there's a lot of test and learn being done in these sort of areas at the moment, and there's a lot of work being done on using near field and beacons, for instance, to create service experiences, right? So, in principle, you walk into the bank branch, if anyone does that anymore, or you walk into you walk into the retail store, and the assistant who comes to help you will already know certain things about your status to you to them as a customer and your past purchase behavior before you get to go and speak to them. So there's a lot of experimentation going on in those areas. Is there any real tangible example to point to? In not that many, but there's a lot of testing work being done.
Yeah, I mean, and I just actually, while we were talking about this, I just thought about it. There's a company in Thailand, I think it was bought by TripAdvisor, called Eatigo, right? And the whole point was, what's the restaurant around you and what's the deal that's associated with that restaurant, as long as you give the app the ability to understand where your location is. And, in America, there's all this big deal being made about privacy and location services and stuff. But to be fair, in Asia and in Southeast Asia, nobody cares.
No, nobody does care. And to be honest, I've got a point of view about privacy, which I think maybe is slightly contrary to the mainstream of things. But I honestly don't know that privacy is what people care about. I mean, nobody wants to be exploited, abused, or ripped off, and of course, people don't want that. But the internet was not created to provide anonymity. It wasn't created to have a bunch of avatars bouncing around, behaving as you want. If you walk into a bricks and mortar retail store, right, you don't have anonymity. You may know the employees, you may run into somebody in the store, right? You don't have anonymity, and it's the same in the online environment. When you do things, you leave what we call a digital exhaust, right? There are fragments there that tells us things about your behavior. And I completely think that people should be more educated as to what that digital exhaust is and how it is generally, hopefully, helpful in helping to tailor things to them rather than harmful. So I understand that people don't want to be ripped off. They don't want to be exploited. But I don't think privacy is the issue. Or anonymity is the issue. I think it is just I'm scared of being ripped off. And we have to make very certain that no consumers have experiences which lead them to feel they're being exploited or ripped off. But privacy per se, I think people gave that up the day that social media took off.
Yeah, and I'll actually be even more controversial than you. First of all, I completely agree with you. But I think, and if you look at the way you live your offline life, right, and I will make an equivalency, right, between online and offline. So people want to be online and they want to have anonymity, maybe. Right? But in your offline life, you are actually reverse anonymous, and you want it that way, right? So I think about the way I live my life. I walk into my neighborhood Italian restaurant in Tokyo when I was living there. If it's really good and it's a small place, I want special service. And the only way to do that is to create a relationship one-to-one with the owner chef, or the waiter or waitress that works there. And over time, you know this, and I think everybody, all adults know this too, you continue to go back to like the 4 or 5 places you love, and one of the reasons why you love them is because they know you.
Yep.
And that knowledge of you is actually just deeper than like you wear brown shoes and you're wearing a red tie. You know, you'll come in and at some point you'll be tired and they'll say, "Hey, guy, how was your day?" And you go, "Oh, God, today was terrible. I can't believe it. But I'm going on vacation next week to Bali and I can't wait." And you've just given up free information. And you're
absolutely right.
Say it again. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And you're not so nervous about the context of giving that information to a waiter or a waitress or a chef because you understand that they're not going to use it. I don't want to say against you, but they're not going to, like you say, rip you off. Yeah? But again, you may actually give up preferences to them that will then allow them to give you something more expensive on the menu or give you a better bottle of wine. Like, we do this in our lives on a regular basis. And I think people that understand that they've been retargeted offline their entire lives and they haven't noticed. Maybe it hasn't been as efficient, but I don't believe necessarily that it's, I mean, maybe it scales differently online, for sure. But I think privacy is actually a new thing. People live their offline lives by giving away information about themselves, whether it's in a local restaurant or in just a local shop. They walk in and they want people to know, Mr. Hearn, welcome back. Would you like the salmon that you had last week when you came in? And can I get you a better bottle of wine than you had last time? They know all this information about you, and I think maybe the scale is different and the efficiency is different. But frankly, I don't think that the actual activity is any different than it's been forever.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, as we all know, there's nothing better than walking into your local bar and they automatically go for your favorite drink. Nothing better than that.
Yeah. So this is the other question that I have for you, right? So you've been in this business for a long time. When, like, and I kind of noticed this when, like, I was halfway through my career that I really started to better understand, like, what technology was going to mean, how it was going to be used more efficiently inside my business, and that if I didn't understand it, I was going to be disintermediated by people that did. Like, how do you keep up with all of the things that are going on? And it seems to me that things are moving way faster today than they were even 5 years ago. So what do you do to, like, keep up?
Okay, well, you're exactly right, because the speed of change is remarkable. Is it Ray Kurzweil who says, that every day you wake up will be the slowest speed of change you'll ever see? Yeah. It really is like that, and it is hard to keep up. What I realized 2 to 3 years ago was that it was no longer possible in the advertising business to be a generalist, and I've been a generalist for much of my career, and it was the role of generalists was disappearing. You had to become a specialist in one area or another, and this is when we started hiring specialist mathematical skills, etc. So I realized that. The other thing from a hiring perspective is I think it's really important today is that when you are bringing in new talent into the business, that you bring people in not to teach them, but for them to teach you. And I think that's increasingly what we have to do. The hardest challenge is actually being able to interview people for specialist skills in areas that you don't understand well yourself. So how do I know that this person is really an expert in something like programmatic trading? how do I know that? Because I'm not an expert myself. I understand how it works, but I'm not an expert in the implementation and execution of it. I think what you really have to do is to bring in people who increase the cumulative skill sets, bring people in who are experts in what they do and give them the freedom to exert that expertise rather than to bring people in to train in the old ways that you do things. I think you have to be just really open to new ways of doing things. The other thing that I would say is that in these areas of change, the greatest expert out there is probably only about 3 months ahead of you in their knowledge. And
fair enough.
It's not impossible to do. But look, you're right. You've just got to bring expert skill sets in, and I really do think the age of the generalist in our industry is over. You've got to be a specialist in some area.
Right, so here's another really good question for me. So I'm trying to build my own media business, right? And the idea for me is that I can have a microphone, a laptop, and a partner kind of with the same equipment in Tokyo, and we can build a media business from scratch with very low cost because now the barriers to entry are so low. It's good and bad, right? But in the old days, if I wanted to, like if I were Rupert Murdoch and I wanted to enter the entertainment business in the United States or the media business, I'd have to, buy the New York Post, which is $800 million. And then I'd have to buy Fox Media, which was another few $1 billion, which meant that if I were Michael Waitz or Guy Hearn, I couldn't do that. But today I can.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm doing right now. And frankly, I think that's a great thing because it democratizes a lot of things, right? But the one thing that, as you said earlier, the internet gives us is this ability to sort of frictionlessly and seamlessly distribute things, not just locally, but globally. Yeah. So on the flip side, right, I always look at things as like a two-way market, but on the flip side, it also means that sponsorship, advertising, like public relations can also, like the barriers to entry to that are also lower. You remember because you were probably involved. Like Omnicom as a business is just an amalgamation of a whole bunch of smaller acquired businesses that took place over really it's probably the mid 80s to the mid 90s and continuing smaller now. But you know what I mean? So what do you do to keep track with like all the new things that are taking place from smaller firms? Do you acquire them? Do you watch? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so it's a really good point because you're right. I mean, essentially, media agencies like us, what we did initially was control the means of distribution, right? And that's essentially what we did, and that's what record companies used to do, and travel agents used to do,
movie businesses, right?
Yeah, that's what everybody used to do. And you're right. There are a whole lot of not just startup businesses, but other businesses trying to get into our field. So a lot of the the consultancies, Deloitte's, Accenture, et cetera, all trying to get into the digital consulting and digital media business. It's true. There are a lot of people trying to eat our lunch because the cost of entry is a lot lower. It's not that difficult for a couple of smart guys to put a trading desk together. And it's and to then go public with large amounts of profit to them. It is a challenge, right? Acquisition is one route. Omnicom tends to be a bit more conservative about acquisition than some of our competitors, but it is something that our competitors do. They acquire, and acquiring skill sets is of course great. But whether just acquiring businesses so they don't compete with you, I'm not sure is such a good way forward. There are those means, or you have to make sure that you're moving up the value chain yourself, and that what you're doing is not simply controlling the means of distribution, is that you are actually adding some additional and new value into your clients. That means you need to expand the range of services. So you probably be aware, but maybe not listeners of this divide that we traditionally have in advertising, between media businesses and what are called creative businesses.
Right.
And the creative being essentially the guys who make the films, make the ads. And I think that's all going to come together again because creation of content is going to be the battlefield, because just as you setting up a media business has never been easier, it's never been easier for somebody to make a film, create a message. The costs of entry are low. The ability to collaborate with people around the world is easy. So it's the content space that's going to become a battle between the different types of agencies and a whole range of content providers we probably haven't even thought of yet. And it's really going to be the success is going to be about who can provide that full to market service for brands and make it easy for them and simple for them to do, from taking their growth objectives, turning that into a communication strategy, creating content that people want to watch, hear, or and share, and getting in front of them in the right moments. And it's going to be a battleground that a lot of businesses are going to be in. And it would be easy for established businesses like ours to lose that battle. And we're very well aware of that, and we're trying to innovate and modernize as fast as we can.
Yeah, and to me, that's actually the most interesting part of this conversation is that you, and by definition, your firm actually seems to be so aware of this sort of exogenous threats. It's just interesting to watch because, one of the reasons why I left the financial industry was because I basically technologized myself out of a job. By building all the real-time trading systems, my trading skill was no longer necessary, and I watched it happen. I knew exactly what was going on. When we first started building what we called automated trading systems and then turned into algorithmic tradings, we had time slices and stuff like that. I said, as soon as the technology catches up to my ability to not scale, my role is done. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I think so. And I do think that the agencies of the future may have fewer people in them. Certainly, as I've said before, way fewer generalists, if not none. And the people left within agencies, there's still going to be room for strategy. There's still going to be room for creativity, but there's going to be an awful lot of room for technologists and for data scientists.
Yeah, so I think about this too, right? Like I said, just from my business building side and what it means from an advertising standpoint, right? A lot of media companies make their money by being sort of a platform to place advertisements. And I wonder, what does a firm like Taboola or Outbrain that are just running massive algorithmic businesses mean? And I'm wondering if do you deal with, not them in particular, but that type of business? And how do you think that works and develops over time? Because it's still new too.
We do. I mean, we do deal with. We do work with Outbrain, yeah, and we do recommend and have relationships with Outbrain for certain types of clients, more in the in the high information space rather than than FMCG. So we do that. I mean, I think one of the things that I try to do, although it's a part of my job that I don't get as much time to spend on as I would like, but I do try to work with newer businesses to find, be they startup or not, to try to find opportunities to work together for our mutual benefit and for our clients' benefit. So it is something that is something that we try to do, and luckily in Asia there is such a hub's not the right word. There is such a burst of innovation going on at the moment that there's lots of opportunities and lots of things to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and again, it gets back to what I'm doing too, right? I mean, one of the reasons why I love talking to you is because I feel like we're sitting on the other side of the table, right? We're trying to create a platform that's going to benefit brands and advertisers because we get to reach an audience that other sort of larger media companies will never be able to reach because they don't know who we know, and they actually don't even know what we know, to be fair. But you're seeing the same thing on your side, too, and that's why it fascinates me, the way you're using all this new technology and not getting leapfrogged by other sort of what would normally be considered faster and more nimble firms. It's just interesting to me. And so you'll also go out to new media businesses too to try to find out how to work with them, and that's actually awesome. It's it's a massive incentive for people like I am, and to be fair, I talked to a whole bunch of other podcasters and new media people too for the same reason that, like you said, you hire to learn, which is just a phrase I'm just going to keep using actually, if you don't mind. I will attribute it to you. Fine. No, but it's a great way, because what we used to do, right? I think the way people used to hire, and this is slightly off topic, but the way people used to hire, one was really to justify their own existence, right? I hired, Lisa because Lisa went to the same school that I went to, and if I went to that school, she must be just as smart as I am, and then everything's good. And the second was just kind of to replace yourself so you could get promoted, so someone who had your skills so you could move up and they could just do your job. But what you said is actually a really interesting take on this, right? I used to say I wanted to hire someone that was going to make me obsolete. But that's actually the wrong way to look at it. The way to look at it is I want to hire someone that I can learn from so that I don't get disintermediated and I don't become old-fashioned in the way I think. And that's actually a much better strategy, I think, for hiring people. Not that this is a show about human resources, but I thought that was really interesting, actually.
Well, I think it was, and as I say, I think it was that moment when you realize, and it probably happens in every business, but that moment that you realize that you can't know everything. Right, as much as you try, you cannot know everything, and you've just got to try and deal with the speed of change as best you can. And I found that method works for me so far.
Yeah, no, I love it actually, because again, just to get back to the human resources facet of this, a lot of people are afraid to hire people that are smarter than they are or know things that they don't know because it makes them, like I said, look outdated. But if you're open-minded enough, and I feel like I always have been, if you're open-minded enough and you hire people that are smarter than you are, just have a different sort of core competency than you do, then you get to learn from them, and it just means like your usefulness inside your own business just becomes stronger and stronger because you know everything you've known up until now, and then you know all the new things too, and that's really powerful, I think.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the idea, and I think one of the things that still on human resources, but one of the things that gets talked about a lot is diversity, right? And when people say diversity, they often mean equality, right? Equality of opportunity, and of course that's essential to put in place. But when I talk about diversity, I mean bringing people in from different backgrounds that adds something new to the organization, adds a new perspective, a new skill set, and just makes things creates a bigger and better melting pot for everybody to collaborate with. And I think that element of diversity, particularly for us and maybe other industries as well, but for us in the advertising communications industry, haven't necessarily been that great at diversity in that sense. And I think we need to be much better at it if we're going to continue to prosper.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I think that no large corporations globally have been that good at any kind of diversity for a bunch of different reasons. But you make a really good point. Diversity isn't just like your background and what you look like and where you've come from. It's just what you know and your perspective. And maybe those things are combined. Maybe there's a combination of those things for sure. But I believe strongly, like you do, that diversity is kind of multi-layered and multi-matrixed. In other words, it cuts a bunch of different ways. And you're right. When I sat on a trading desk, the people that sat around me on that trading desk were a lot like I was. Yeah, and that wasn't good either because, in the same way that you want different opinions there, you want different opinions in any market, and that's, I think, always beneficial, right? And it cuts across all sort of however you want to define diversity, but I think it's really important. And to be fair, when we build our business, we want to build it diverse from the beginning so we don't have to bolt it on later, right? It's harder in a bigger business, but in a small business, you can do it from the get-go. And it's good to be able to exist in an environment where that is possible from the start, right? Because all those resources are available as well. So the last thing I want to ask, right, and I mean, I could talk about this with you forever, obviously, but the last thing I want to ask is, what kind of feedback do you get from your biggest clients? Like, I'd love to know what that conversation is like when they finally come to you. Because here's what happens in my mind, right? They've been working with you for 15 years. You continue to get better, have more influence, and do this stuff. But then the technology changes, and they say, "Yep, we'll use the new tech. We'll go onto Facebook. We'll do some Twitter stuff." And then they come back and say, "Are we doing the right thing?" Like, what's their view now that they've been sort of in this market for a few years? And they come to you and say, "Are we doing the right thing? Like, is this really working? And how do we know?"
Yeah. So the measurement challenges, right, as we said earlier, are extreme, and you do have to have a little bit of test and learn. New platforms coming online every day, and who knows which will immediately, right, which will work well and
we
which
don't.
And I think one of the things that has happened to a lot of our larger clients is that procurement has become a much bigger player than used to be the case, right? And they're looking to see the return on investment and efficiency and low cost as they should be doing, right? But that's become a much bigger part. So you're having conversations with procurement about how you can demonstrate the value of what you do, and then this is where you're running into measurement challenges. So if you take something like econometrics, right? You can do econometric analysis of the impact of what you've done in the what you've done in the past on growing, sales volume, sales value, or footfall into store or whatever it might be. You can measure all of those things. The thing is that all of that looks backwards, right? You can't measure the impact of things you haven't done, and you're trying to work out all of this. I think that our clients are often driven by different clients, different things, but they're driven by different pressures. First, test and learn and experimenting with something new. Okay, we have the ability to potentially to drive forward, but the stuff that we've been doing has been working pretty well. Right. Is there really any incentive for me to put that at risk by changing something new? And to make this point, I would say that also that the people that with the turnover at client level, at brand level for us, turnover can be quite quick, right? You get people in senior marketing roles who may only be in those roles for say 2 years. Okay. Now, 2 years, and a lot of the relationships that you have. I mean, I would love to say that my brand's within OMG, that it's all about the brand, and the brand stands for these fantastic values. And look, and of course, to some extent they do. But a lot of it's about the relationship between individuals, and whereby when an individual at a brand marketer leaves, then you got to start again with somebody who may have different perspectives, different beliefs, and different experiences than you do. The same happens at our side, right? When people leave agencies and move into a startup environment, or they go off and work for what may be the more glamorous Googles and Facebooks of this world, right? Right. Then we've also got to start those relationships again. So in order to pursue innovation and good test and learn, you really have to have a stable relationship, not just between the brand and the agency, but the people who are on both sides who are in that relationship. When that occurs, we're able to get good experience in place, put good work in place. As you know, in our business, we put set a lot of store by award-winning work. We're able to get the clients to back the slightly riskier work that often is award-winning in the end, and those stable relationships really help that. But where you have relationships where it's either not stable from our side or fast turnover on the client side, it's much harder to get that done, and things tend not to innovate at the same rate.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and we saw the same thing all the time, right? When the buy-side trader changed, it was almost like getting a new client.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, it's got to be the same thing for you. Look, I think this is the perfect place to end, and it's gone by much faster than I would have expected, but this has been a really fascinating conversation, touching on a whole bunch of topics that I hadn't even intended to address. So I hope this was as good for you as it was for me, but I really enjoyed this. Great.
Yeah, I did too. And thanks very much for inviting me onto the podcast, and I look forward to downloading future episodes.
Yeah, thank you, guys. So I want to thank Guy Hearn. I'm going to get this right this time. Chief Innovation Officer. So you didn't get it right the first time. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Cheers.
Cheers.
You've been listening to Asia Tech Podcast. Find out more at www.asiatechpodcast.com.